We're learning some new details today after the Smithsonian Institution decided to remove references to President Donald Trump's 2 impeachments from an exhibit on the American presidency. This is the National Museum of American History that we're talking about here in Washington, D.C., that removed the content last month.
We should note, despite President's removal from the exhibit, it still includes information about the impeachments of Presidents Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton, and the impeachment process against President Richard Nixon, who resigned from office before he was formally impeached.
And the Smithsonian removed details about President Donald Trump's impeachments from the exhibit at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. It took place at the same time the Portrait Gallery displayed a new black and white image of President Trump in the America's Presidents exhibit. The label under the portrait notes the president's birth date and that he is the 45th and 47th president. The previous label provided information about the president's 2 impeachments and that the Senate acquitted him both times.
Hey guys, Adam is here. The ground just shifted beneath Washington in a way that has career politicians on both sides of the aisle genuinely terrified. A federal court in D.C. has done something that legal experts said was nearly impossible. Something that has triggered emergency meetings behind closed doors and sent staffers scrambling through hallways with looks of pure panic on their faces.
Right now, President Trump is holding his first cabinet meeting of his second term in the White House. Tech billionaire Elon Musk is in that meeting, despite not being a member. Now, Musk is a senior advisor to the president, and today he talked about the work he's doing in the administration's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, to identify waste, fraud, or abuse. Now, this comes as the Trump administration is preparing to trim the federal workforce even more to help address the nation's deficit.
If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing, it is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here. And taking a lot of flack, and getting a lot of death threats, by the way. I mean, I'd like to stack them up, you know. But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done.
The court has officially ignited proceedings that could lead to the impeachment of not just Donald Trump, but multiple members of his administration simultaneously. We are talking about cabinet secretaries, senior White House advisors, high-ranking officials across the executive branch, all potentially facing impeachment charges for what lawmakers and constitutional scholars are calling coordinated attacks on the very foundation of American democracy.
All right, we're going to begin this hour with another likely criminal investigation of a prominent critic of President Trump. This time it's Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. He faces a Justice Department probe. It was announced on the very same day that lawyers for 2 other Trump critics were back in court arguing their criminal indictments should be dismissed. Scott McFarland is covering it all for us, as he has for a while now. Scott, good morning.
Hey, Tony, good morning. A Trump administration housing official is making the same type of allegation against Congressman Swalwell that the administration has made against other political critics of the president, questioning whether the California Democrat engaged in fraud in securing a home mortgage in Washington, D.C., and they have formally asked the Department of Justice to investigate it. Swalwell, who served as an impeachment manager against Trump in his first term, denied any wrongdoing, and he blasted the accusations as politically motivated, saying, "The only thing I'm surprised about is that it took him this long to come after me."
The allegations include systematic obstruction of Congress, deliberate violations of federal court orders, and abuse of power on a scale that makes previous scandals look like parking tickets. This is not another political food fight. This is the constitutional equivalent of a nuclear launch being authorized, and the shockwaves are already rattling every office in the Capitol. What makes this moment so historically significant is the scope of what is being proposed. For the first time in American history, we are looking at the possibility of holding an entire administration accountable for alleged crimes and constitutional violations, not just one bad actor at the top. The legal filings that the D.C. court has accepted present evidence of coordinated wrongdoing that allegedly involved dozens of officials working together to push past every legal constraint on executive power. We are talking about deportations carried out in direct defiance of judges who had issued stays. We are talking about congressionally appropriated funds being illegally redirected to projects Congress had explicitly rejected. We are talking about systematic retaliation against whistleblowers who dared to speak up about what was happening inside federal agencies. And now a federal court has looked at the evidence and decided that this case deserves to move forward, that the allegations are serious enough to warrant what could become the most expansive impeachment proceedings since the founders designed the system. Let me walk you through exactly what just happened, because the details matter, and they are genuinely shocking. House Democrats, working alongside multiple legal advocacy organizations, filed extensive documentation with the D.C. District Court, demanding a comprehensive impeachment inquiry that goes far beyond the former president. These filings include whistleblower affidavits from people who were inside the room when decisions were made. They include leaked internal memos that allegedly show officials discussing how to circumvent legal checks and balances. They include sworn congressional testimony that has been sitting in committee files, waiting for a moment like this. And according to reports from multiple outlets, the evidence paints a picture of an administration that didn't just occasionally overstep. It allegedly operated with a systematic disregard for constitutional constraints, treating court orders as suggestions, treating congressional oversight as an annoyance to be ignored, and treating federal employees who raised concerns as enemies to be destroyed. Fox News has reported that Representative Al Green and several other Democratic lawmakers have filed what they are calling privileged impeachment motions, describing this as the broadest impeachment case since Watergate. That comparison to Watergate is not hyperbole. During the Nixon era, the focus was primarily on the president himself. Yes, his aides faced criminal prosecution, but the impeachment mechanism was aimed at one man. What is being proposed now is fundamentally different. The argument being made to the court and to Congress is that when an entire administration engages in coordinated constitutional violations, the remedy must be equally comprehensive. You cannot impeach one person and call it a day if the people around them continued the same behavior. You cannot hold the president accountable while leaving in place the officials who planned and executed the policies that violated the law. This is accountability on a scale we have never attempted before. The specific allegations in these filings are devastating when you examine them closely. According to SN News and other outlets, the impeachment articles cite systematic abuse of power, unlawful executive orders, and coordinated obstruction of Congress as the foundation of the case. They name high-profile cabinet officials alongside the former president. We are potentially looking at impeachment proceedings against people who served as Attorney General, as Secretary of Homeland Security, as White House Chief of Staff, and in other positions of enormous authority within the executive branch. The whistleblower testimony reportedly describes meetings where administration officials openly discussed ways to get around congressional oversight. One affidavit describes a cabinet meeting where an official allegedly said they would simply ignore a federal judge's ruling because they believed the judge was politically motivated. Another describes discussions about how to retaliate against inspectors general who were becoming too effective at uncovering problems within their departments. Let that sink in. These are not accusations of policy disagreements or bureaucratic incompetence. These are accusations of deliberate, coordinated efforts to place the executive branch above the law, above judicial review, above congressional oversight. And now a federal court has determined that these accusations are serious enough to warrant moving forward with proceedings that could fundamentally reshape how we think about executive accountability. The legal framework being deployed here is genuinely unprecedented. Impeachment has traditionally been used for individual office holders, a president, a federal judge, a cabinet member, one at a time. But constitutional scholars supporting this case argue that when you have systematic corruption and abuse running through multiple layers of government, you cannot just pick off one person and declare victory. One law professor quoted in the court filings put it bluntly: if an administration can violate the law by having the president give orders and cabinet members execute them, and then only the president faces consequences while everyone else walks away, you have created a system where accountability is structurally impossible. The rule of law becomes whatever the president says it is because no one else ever has to answer for their actions. The evidence that has been presented to the court reportedly includes specific, documented instances of lawlessness. There are allegations about deportations carried out against individuals who had active stays of removal granted by federal judges. The administration allegedly went ahead anyway, ignoring the court orders because they disagreed with the legal reasoning. There are allegations about systematic defiance of congressional appropriations, with funds that Congress had allocated for specific purposes being redirected to projects Congress had refused to fund. The border wall is the most prominent example, but whistleblowers describe this as a pattern that extended across multiple agencies and departments. There are allegations about retaliation campaigns against federal employees who raised concerns. People with years of service, with clean records, suddenly finding themselves reassigned to dead-end positions, having their security clearances revoked without explanation, being subjected to internal investigations that went nowhere but destroyed their careers. One leaked memo that has been cited in the filings allegedly shows a senior White House official writing about the need to find ways around the Inspector General system because that office was becoming too effective at uncovering problems. Think about what that means. The people at the highest levels of the executive branch were allegedly sitting in meetings, writing memos, discussing how to undermine the very watchdogs who are supposed to ensure the government operates legally and ethically. This is not incompetence. This is not confusion about what the law requires. This is deliberate, systematic efforts to avoid accountability. What makes this moment particularly explosive is that some of the outrage is beginning to cross party lines. Now, let me be clear, most Republicans are still circling the wagons, still defending the administration, still calling this a partisan witch hunt. But there are cracks appearing in that wall of protection, and some of those cracks are significant. Several Republican lawmakers who have been reliable allies of Trump in the past have privately expressed serious concerns about the scope of the allegations. They are conservatives who built their careers on respect for the Constitution, on defending separation of powers, on insisting that Congress has authority over spending. And they are finding it increasingly difficult to defend an administration that allegedly trampled all over those principles. One Republican senator told reporters off the record that if even half of what is in these whistleblower reports is accurate, the administration engaged in behavior that no conservative should defend, regardless of partisan loyalty. That kind of language from within Republican ranks matters because it suggests that the unified front that has protected Trump and his team from accountability in the past might be starting to fracture. The political timing of this court action is impossible to ignore. We are heading into a major election season, and this impeachment case is going to dominate the conversation for months. Democrats are betting that exposing the full scope of alleged constitutional violations will energize their base and convince independents that accountability matters more than party loyalty. They are gambling that average Americans, regardless of how they voted, will be troubled by evidence of systematic lawlessness at the highest levels of government. Republicans are preparing to frame this as exactly what they have always called it, a partisan witch hunt designed to overturn election results and destroy political opponents. They will argue that Democrats have been trying to impeach Trump since day one and that this is just more of the same. But what makes this different from previous impeachment efforts is the sheer volume of evidence that has apparently been compiled, the number of officials being targeted, and the fact that a federal court has deemed the case worthy of moving forward. This is not just political theater playing out on cable news. This is the judicial branch signaling that the allegations are serious enough to warrant the full attention of Congress and the American people. Let me tell you what lawmakers are actually saying about this because the language coming out of Capitol Hill is intense and revealing. Democratic representatives are using words we rarely hear in official proceedings. They are calling this a fight to restore constitutional order. They are talking about sending a message that no office is immune from accountability, not the president, not the attorney general, not the cabinet. Representative Al Green, who has filed impeachment articles against Trump before, told reporters that this case represents the culmination of years of documented abuses that can no longer be ignored. He argued that the evidence of coordinated constitutional violations is so overwhelming that Congress has a duty to act, not just to punish wrongdoing, but to prevent future administrations from believing they can operate with the same impunity. Other Democratic lawmakers have pointed to specific incidents as examples of a pattern of lawlessness that went far beyond normal policy disagreements. The family separation policy, the use of federal agents against protesters, the interference with mail operations during an election year. They are arguing that we crossed a line from having an administration with controversial policies to having an administration that actively undermined democratic institutions and the rule of law. And now a federal court has given them the platform to make that case in proceedings that could stretch for months and capture the attention of the entire nation. The legal advocacy groups supporting this impeachment push are equally forceful in their arguments. Organizations that have been tracking administration actions for years have compiled databases of alleged violations, policy reversals that defied court orders, instances where officials made public statements that directly contradicted established law. These groups argue that the systematic nature of the violations proves this was not just incompetence or bureaucratic confusion. It was a deliberate strategy to expand executive power beyond constitutional limits. One legal scholar wrote that the administration essentially conducted a stress test on American democracy, pushing every boundary to see what they could get away with. And the results of that stress test revealed dangerous weaknesses in our system of accountability. The argument being made is that if we do not hold this administration fully accountable for every violation, we are essentially giving future presidents a roadmap for how to undermine democratic constraints on their power. The stakes, these advocates argue, go far beyond any single person. This is about whether the American system of government can defend itself against authoritarian tendencies. The international implications of this case are also enormous, even though they are getting less attention than the domestic political battle. America's standing in the world has always rested in part on the perception that we are a nation of laws, not men, and that our democratic institutions are strong enough to hold even the most powerful officials accountable. When an American administration is credibly accused of systematic constitutional violations, and the response is a shrug and partisan protection, it undermines that global reputation and emboldens authoritarian leaders who can point to American hypocrisy. The fact that a federal court is taking these allegations seriously and allowing comprehensive impeachment proceedings to move forward sends a different message, that American democracy might be tested and strained, but it is not broken beyond repair. Allies who depend on American leadership in defending democratic values around the world are watching this case closely, and so are adversaries who would love nothing more than to see American democracy tear itself apart. So, where does this leave us? We are at the beginning of what could be the most consequential accountability battle in modern American history. A D.C. federal court has ignited proceedings that could result in multiple impeachments across an entire administration. The evidence being presented suggests systematic constitutional violations that touched every level of executive power. The legal arguments being made could fundamentally reshape how we think about executive accountability, moving from a model where we punish individual bad actors to one where we recognize that systematic violations require systematic remedies. And the political implications are absolutely massive heading into an election season where voters will be deciding the future direction of the country while simultaneously watching the legal system grapple with the alleged sins of the recent past. This is about more than partisan point scoring or political revenge. It is about whether our system of checks and balances actually functions when it is tested by officials who are willing to coordinate in pushing past constitutional boundaries. The court's decision to move forward with this case represents a crucial moment where the judiciary is asserting its role in defending democratic institutions. And what happens next will define American democracy for a generation. We are watching history unfold in real time, and the outcome of these proceedings will either restore faith in accountability or confirm the fears of those who believe powerful people have become untouchable. Either way, Washington is in absolute chaos right now, and